Life in the Sahara Desert was never boring. There were some days that were more exciting than others, but I remember one day in particular, we were moving our trucks from one drilling location to another, and as we moved along, I noticed off to the side something white, and I mentioned it to the guy sitting next to me, and he said, "Yeah, it's white. Look, it looks like a skeleton." So we stopped, walked over to where this white thing was, and sure enough, it was a skeleton. It was the whole skeleton, from the skull all the way down to the toe bones. Underlying that skeleton was kind of military green wool, a jacket of some coat that had been worn by this particular person. It actually had bronze buttons on it, and we looked at one of those buttons. On the back side it had the names of 2 German cities. So we put 2 and 2 together and figured this guy died during World War II. He was a German soldier. He's a remnant from World War II in the Desert War. That's our first thought. But interestingly enough, as we looked at the skeleton, it actually had hardened flesh on the bottoms of the feet and on the palms of the hands. Everywhere else, the flesh was gone. Just sun-bleached bones. And so the question was, gosh, this guy couldn't have been here this long. Couldn't have been in World War II. At any rate, we looked at it. The workers that were with us, the Libyans, commented on it. There was some talk about, hey, maybe we should bury the skeleton. And the advice that seemed to be given was, no, that's not really our job. This person could be a Libyan, and we really shouldn't be in charge of that. We need to get somebody else that's an expert. So anyway, we took several pictures, conjectured about who this guy was and why he's out there and why he died. So we left the skeleton in place and moved on to the next drilling camp. When we got there, there was a Lebanese doctor assigned to the camp, and I was talking to him about our find. He asked a bunch of questions, and he said, "Could you take me back out there?" And we said, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we got out there, and he got out of the truck. He walked around that skeleton. He didn't actually do it. He didn't touch the skeleton. He just walked around it. And I would say within a minute or a minute and a half, he had summed up the whole situation. Now, actually, during that time, he did pull some of that coat out from under the skeleton, and he found some money in the pocket. But here was his summary. He said this man was probably, it is a man, it's a male, probably about 26 years old. He was from coastal Libya, probably the city of Tobruk. He died 6 months before. He died of dehydration, lack of water. Looks like he had stolen some money from an Italian visitor because he had a pocket full of Italian lira. He must have stolen the money, said the doctor, and just headed out into the desert trying to escape from maybe somebody chasing him out there. Well, he certainly went in the wrong direction because he ended up dying. So I asked the doctor, how do you know all this? How can you just look at this skeleton and know what gender it is and how long how long the guy's been here and so on? He said, well, my field of study was forensic medicine. He said, I love doing this kind of thing. So anyway, the doctor made some mental notes, and we went back to the drilling camp. What I understood later was that the doctor had contacted some authorities from the city of Tobruk, and they must have come out and found the skeleton and actually had a proper burial in accordance with local customs. The people that were contacted knew who the man was, and indeed he had stolen some money. What a tragic thing. He couldn't have had more than about $10 in his pocket, even though he had a lot of those aluminum lira coins. But to lose his life over just a pocket full of coins, such a tragedy. At any rate, there's a lesson in all this. You really can't run away from the things you do. I think in the scriptures there's a verse that says something to the effect, be sure your sins will find you out. And this is a tragic example of that. So, what do we do with things like finding skeletons? How do we honor a skeleton? This was a question that came up. I think most of us, when we first saw it, thought we should bury it. But it turns out that death is sacred, and each culture has their own view of how to deal with death. I think that point was really driven home to me. I would have buried him. I would have gotten a shovel or something and covered his body. But that obviously was not a proper response to that. There was another way. So how do we think about death? It's easy to die in the desert. I don't know if that man took water with him or not, but he certainly died. And how do we think about death? How long does life last was a question that came to my mind, and I never thought much about death until I saw that skeleton. In fact, when you're young, you never think about death. You got a whole life before you. But I have to be very honest that was kind of startling to see that man in the sand.